Hi, I'm here with Volodya Lysenko, and he's been kind enough to put together some thoughts about quasi-experimental design and how it might relate to your MIPM capstone. And Volodya, please.
Yeah, so in classical experimental design, you usually deal with two groups of subjects. One is control group, to which you give something like placebo, and the other one is your study group, to which you give some medications if you work in healthcare industry or research, and you look how the results of this treatment are reflected on the state of the patients. And if you see that all the rest conditions are the same for two groups, except for one group was treated with some medication and another was treated with just placebo instead of medication, you can come to the conclusion that those medications were responsible for the differences between two groups that you observe.
All right, so you're talking about like the
classical
experimental design,
yeah.
and in health, you got a group that gets a placebo and a group that gets a treatment.
Yeah.
And we don't actually get the freedom to do that
Absolutely.
sort of thing.
Nobody would allow you to somehow
administer placebo on an infrastructure system, right?
Absolutely.
We're not going to get to do that.
Yeah. So the classical example of how you deal with this problem is comparative instead of experimental design. And in the comparative design, you consider two systems which are very similar in everything except for some particular situation. And the classical example is, for example, Eastern and Western Germany.
Right.
After the Second World War, Eastern Germany was under Soviet control and it was a totalitarian state. And you see what was the result of that type of the regime after those countries were united in 1989.
Right, because you had the Eastern Bloc with a different political system,
Absolutely.
having a differential effect on its infrastructure system.
Absolutely.
But everybody needed the same infrastructure system.
Yeah.
So you can isolate the political.
Yeah. So initially
background.
they have totally the same conditions. They had absolutely the same infrastructure system in the United Germany, but then they were divided, and you could compare what happened after the totalitarian regime and the planned economy, and democratic regime in Western Germany with market economy.
So you could conceivably then, as what you're describing is using comparative analysis to test just about any kind of hypothesis.
Absolutely.
As long as you can find
systems that are similar in everything except for some particular
the
conditions.
factor that you want to test, right? Like, so you can find a jurisdiction that has one kind of policy and a jurisdiction that does not.
Yeah, and you can compare the outcomes of these policies based on
or one level of investment or not, or right? Okay, cool.
Yeah. And another example of this situation, for example, current ongoing example in South and North Korea. You also see absolutely the same initial conditions of the United Korea after the Second World War, and then what happened after one part of the Korea was under totalitarian rule and another one under more liberal, more democratic and more market rule. And you can see the results of this ruling currently. And this similar situation can be applied to other systems. For example, if you study two different countries with very similar parameters, but in one country, for example, information and communication technologies and networks were used successfully for conducting some kind of people's revolution, like we observed during the Arab Spring in 2011. But in another country, it was not successful. So you're looking what was similar and what was different in those two countries, and you can come
Right,
to
because
the
they
conclusion.
both had access to the new
Yes,
communication
absolutely,
technologies,
but
but you had different results in one
This,
case than
yes,
another,
and
right?
for example, they had different policies about the use of information technologies. They could use different.
So you could like take the case of Egypt and compare it to
Egypt,
the case of Syria.
Absolutely,
for
and
instance, right?
in Egypt it was relatively smooth transition and relatively bloodless. But in
Right.
Syria we have like 70,000 casualties already.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah,
So-
and all with the adoption of new communication
Yeah,
technology.
new communication technologies played great role in all the Arab Spring countries.
Okay, this is really helpful because it can be confusing for students to encounter the kind of language that we have in the LEDI text about all the different forms of experimental design that you could choose to do as part of your research. And the truth is, you're going to have a pretty limited array of options, and you'll have to be creative because you don't actually get to have a classic experiment when you
Absolutely.
study infrastructure systems.
So don't count that you will be able to somehow apply some medications to your systems that you are considering. Yeah.
It's great.
Don't try to do that.
Thank you, Volodya.
Yeah, thank you.